I'm here at the Czar Award for Monday, June 8, 2009. It's a service to taxpayers from America's newest automotive headquarters, Washington, D.C. This is the first in a series of Czar Awards to be conferred upon Washington meddlers who distinguish themselves by making it harder for the auto companies your government owns, to compete in the world marketplace. Today's Czar Award goes to Congressman Barney of Massachusetts for interfering in the operation of General Motors. Congressman Frank is chairman of the Financial Services Committee of the House of Representatives. One might call it the House Bailout Committee. Congressman Frank's phone call to General Motors always is likely to be returned, since the United States Treasury recently purchased 60% of GM and 8% of Chrysler with $62 billion of your tax dollars. According to the June 5th Wall Street Journal, quote, the latest self-appointed car czar is Massachusetts' own Barney Frank, who intervened this week to save a GM distribution center in Norton, Massachusetts. The warehouse, which employs some 90 people, was slated for closing by the end of the year under GM's restructuring plan. But Mr. Frank put in a call to GM CEO Fritz Henderson and secured a new lease on life for the facility, unquote. The congressman's spokesman said that Mr. Frank was, quote, just doing what any other congressman would do, unquote, and looking out for the interests of his constituency. Precisely the reason for these Czar Awards. As the Journal put it, quote, that's the problem with industrial policy and in governmental control of American business. In Washington, every member of Congress now thinks he's a czar who can call old Fritz and tell him how to make cars, unquote. I will continue to confer Czar Awards until Congress and the President enact my auto stock for every taxpayer legislation, which would distribute the government stock in General Motors and Chrysler to the 120 million Americans who paid taxes on April 15. That's the fastest way to get ownership of the auto companies out of the hands of meddling Washington politicians and back into the hands of Americans in the marketplace. It also may be the fastest way for congressmen to get themselves reelected. According to the Nashville Tennessean, an Auto Pacific survey reports that 81% of Americans polled, quote, agreed that the faster the government gets out of the automotive business, the better, unquote. And 95% disagreed, quote, that the government is as good an overseer of corporations, disagreed that the government is a good overseer of corporations such as General Motors and Chrysler, unquote. And 93% disagreed, quote, that having the government in charge of General Motors and Chrysler will result in cars and trucks that Americans will want to buy, unquote. Mr. President, there should be plenty of material for these Czar Awards. For example, last week, auto executives spent 4 hours testifying before congressional committees about dealerships. I assume the executives drove to Washington, D.C. from Detroit in their congressionally approved modes of transportation, probably hybrid cars, leaving them very little time on that day to design, build, or sell cars and trucks. I've counted at least 60 congressional committees and subcommittees with the authority to hold hearings on auto companies, and no doubt most will. Car executives trying to manage complex companies will be reduced to the status of some assistant secretary hauling briefing books between committees, answering questions, under oath of course, about models, about sizes, about paint colors, about plant closings, about fuel efficiency, and about why the GM Volts battery is being made in South Korea. And should congressmen run out of reasons to meddle, the President and his aides stand ready. Already the administration has warned General Motors that it's making too many SUVs and that its Chevy Volt is too expensive. The President himself has weighed in on whether General Motors should move to Warren, Michigan, and has fired one General Motors president. Now here's an invitation for those who may be listening. If you know of a Washington car czar who deserves to be honored, please email me at caraward@alexander.senate.gov and I'll give you full credit in my regular Czar reports here on the floor of the United States Senate. And after you write me, I hope you'll write or call your congressmen and senators and remind them to enact the Auto Stock for Every Taxpayer Act just as soon as General Motors emerges from bankruptcy. All you need to say when you write or call are these 8 magic words: I paid for it, I should own it. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to include in the congressional record the Wall Street Journal editorial from June 5th entitled Barney Frank, Czar. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.